Maybe you can move like closer to me. You're falling off the screen. Come closer.
You wanted to be the center of attention, so I was letting you be the center.
Yeah. You guys are sitting on opposite sides. Yes. You noticed, huh?
Yes. Sarah really thought she wasn't getting much attention, so she wanted to be closer to the center.
I have a windowsill here for my water, so it's a little easier.
All right. Should we start recording?
Yeah, let's start. So welcome everyone to Monday Musings. I'm Dr. Syra, and I'm going to call myself a trainer because I'm doing training programs now, and a psychotherapist and the clinical director at Dragonfly Wellness, and we've also co-founded together Dragonfly Academy. So that's all the jobs that I'm doing these days.
Yeah. My name's Faison. I'm a life and relationship coach at Dragonfly Wellness. We've recently relaunched a new kind of version of Dragonfly Academy, and the first couple of courses have been delivered. So you delivered a a course for kind of therapists and other helpers to support South Asian clients, which was awesome. Monique, our other partner, is delivering emotional. What is it? The energetic
centering technique. Yeah. So it's a really cool technique. Clicking. Sorry, everyone. Okay, there.
Let me manage it. You do this.
I like to get involved.
Yes.
So what we're finding is that there's different kind of areas of health, right? And we've kind of, as a society, split all those areas out and said, okay, emotional health over here, mental health over here, physical health over here, spiritual health over there, and we've kind of split that out. And because of that split, it's kind of cool. We have people at Dragonfly Wellness who now have specialized training, right? Who we've brought all together to now say, okay, here's a person. How do we support them in their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health, and their spiritual health? And so Monique is kind of our emotional health trainer, and she's doing online courses. It's just a 2-hour course where you learn a particular technique to do something called emotional releasing and energetic centering. And so she's pulled from things like the Sedona method, the law of attraction, some polyvagal theory and regulating your body and your brain. So she's kind of pulled all these pieces together, and she's been practicing this for probably like 2 decades or more. And we're finally like, Monique, you need to teach this to people because it's really, really powerful stuff. And she's distilled down like what's missing from this method. Like, for example, law of attraction, right? They talk about going to a good feeling thought, but how do you can't just like convince yourself to go to a good feeling thought. There's a process that has to happen before you're ready to shift your thought, right? Or a better feeling, but how do you get to that if your thoughts are rolling? So she really takes people through the thinking, the feeling, and the releasing process. And it's like she's like distilled it down to 2 hours. And so just this coming Saturday, she's actually opened it up to online clients. Last Saturday, she did it just in person and just for the people who came physically. And then next Saturday, she's doing a blended model with in-person and online. So that's happening. Dr. Kim, we have another doctor, physician on board, and she's going to be doing a program called Food and Mood in the beginning of April. And then we have Lucas, who you met last week, who's our transpersonal therapist, and he's starting an online men's group. Finally, it's going to be online. So that's going to be on Thursday nights. So there's lots of different things kind of coming down the pipes. And if you get our newsletter, pay attention to that if you're interested, because that's where we'll kind of be listing all these things and how to register and all of that. So lots happening.
Yeah. So today, as part of Monday Musings, because it's a new month, we're changing up the topic. And the topic for this month is communications. And today is, I think the video that you shared on YouTube this week was around the brain science, especially, and then I have some other questions. So do you want to first talk about some of the concepts you talked about on the video and how they actually relate to communications, and then I have other questions and comments here. Yeah.
So
And when we talk about communication, what are we talking about? Other than yawning at people,
Sending people messages that I'm tired.
Yeah.
It's been a long day. I was like doing like supervision with a therapist and like meetings, and it was good. It was a good day. Okay. So what I taught in the video this week is something that actually my clients have asked me to make a video about, like, because I teach it to them in session, and they're like, "Oh, Dr. Sarah, like, do you have a video about that, or is there somewhere I can read more about that?" But it's something that I've developed over the years, and so there isn't like a book you can go and read about it. But I could make a video, and so I made one about this particular modality, this particular way of understanding. Okay, I'm going to use the technical terms for those of my friends out there who are students and like writing things down. So it's something called the polyvagal theory. Polyvagal theory. So the vagus nerve is involved in the fight or flight response. Okay, so the vagus nerve is involved in the fight or flight response. They used to think that it was just one nerve and then it would get activated or not, and they couldn't really figure out how it went. Now we know that it's like kind of like imagine like a rope almost with like two different things that can happen. So then there's like, if you want the technical names, there's like ventral vagal and dorsal vagal, and different things happen when these different nerves are activated. Okay, so these are things that are happening in your brain and they're triggered by stress, and there's certain responses in the body. So the way that you might have heard about this in kind of layman's terms is fight or flight, right? You've learned about fight or flight, the fight or flight response. Now, many of us are walking around chronically stuck in fight or flight. And so that's what I developed this little tool around, and I actually taught this tool on last Friday to the therapist when we were talking about supporting South Asian clients. I teach this to like most of my clients, whatever their background. So here's a tool. So if you didn't watch the video, I'm going to take you through a quick replay. And this is an interactive class today, friends. So you have to do it with me, okay? And we've done it before. You've probably seen this before. So take 2 fingers, tap here in the middle of your head, and out loud say, "This is my captain.
This 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 is my captain.
Now here at the side of your eyes, this is my first mate.
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 Now at the back here, under the bump, this is the sheriff.
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 Okay, so what does that mean? So the captain is the part of our brain that sees the big picture, looks out over the horizon, can solve problems, can steer the ship in advance to get it, back on course. The captain is the part of our brain that's cool and calm and collected and doesn't really get like phased about a lot of things. The captain can keep his mouth shut and not respond. Things don't really activate him. He's very kind of chill. We all have that, and it develops around 10 years old, and it's called the prefrontal cortex. Okay, so it's there before 10 as well, but there's not a lot of neural activity happening there until after 10 years old. That's why when you have little kids, you have to like repeat yourself over and over and over and over, because they haven't actually formed that voice in their own head yet. You're their captain until they have their own captain at 10. Then there's the first mate. So the first mate's job is simply to scan the horizon and look for danger. That's its only job. It's the limbic system. And so just scanning. Oh, there's a shadow, must be a shark, right? So when the shadow comes, the first mate has a choice to make. Either send that information up to the captain for problem solving, or back to the sheriff. Now, the sheriff's one job, keep you alive. Okay, so that's the brainstem. That's the oldest part of the brain, and it's just designed for life. So breathing, heart rate, blood flow, digestive system, that's controlled by the sheriff. If the information goes from the first mate to the sheriff takes over. Everybody else moves aside and the sheriff takes over. Now, what does that look like in the context of communication? Well, when you're in your sheriff, you're going to shout. You're going to say mean things that you didn't mean to say. You're going to maybe stonewall or silent treatment. Your heart's going to be pounding. You're going to be like feel almost out of control. And that for some people that can happen like in every conversation with a particular other person. Like, it's like that other person becomes the shark and they keep activating. I think someone's coming in the room. So, and here's the other interesting and complicated part about that. If you grew up with a lot of shouting or violence or kind of just like general emotional unpredictability in your household, then your first mate and your sheriff become really good friends, right? So after a while, the first mate doesn't even filter that information, just automatically sends it back to the sheriff. So everything feels like a fight, okay? Now, if you think about like a really, really little kid, like even like a 2-year-old, right? 2-year-old hears shouting, there's this response that happens. That happens enough, and the first mate's just going to be like, this place isn't safe, make sure the sheriff's in charge. Grow up into adulthood, and now you find yourself overreacting to things, saying things that you don't mean, having a tone of voice, and people are like, you don't need to use that tone, and you're like, what tone? I don't even know I'm using a tone. That's all because the sheriff's in charge. So that's what we're talking about today.
And why is that important? Why is communication important to begin with?
Is that a trick question?
No, I'm trying to get out of communicating here.
Okay, everybody who's with us here on Monday Musings live, tell us, what do you think is the purpose of communication? Feels like a trick question. So what do you think?
There's no question. It's seriously
there's
a
no
question.
right answer?
Yeah, it's seriously a question, right? Because
what's the point?
Yeah.
Why do we communicate?
Because it feels like you can get by without communication, possibly. If you want to be a loner.
Connection. Yeah. Communication helps with connection. It helps with problem solving. It helps with helping people see your point of view or your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It helps with just like being social, right? So if we want to be connected to even one other human, yeah, so we can connect with the other person to understand, so you're not misunderstood. So really it's about a relationship, I guess. We communicate to be in relationship with others.
Right.
But that's not true, because I communicate with my dog, right? And like I'm asking her to do certain things, or I'm showing my love to her. That's a communication, even though there's no words around it. So it doesn't have to be verbal.
No, definitely it's not verbal, right? We
can express your feelings and ideas.
Yeah. So I guess the reason I'm asking that question, right? It's a lot of us, I think we just take certain things for granted. Like we get into a relationship thinking we'll just communicate.
Mm-hmm.
1, or 2, we'll feel like the other person will know exactly what I'm thinking and saying, even though the words may mean totally different things to each other, right? So I think the idea of communication, I think we take it for granted, saying that it will be fine. Right, like it's just gonna be.
We should know how to do that.
Yeah, we should know how to do this.
Right.
And I think a lot of us haven't actually understood what it means to communicate.
Right. Somebody's saying, hear the tone. Okay, so something about tone. Can I tell you a little science around that?
Just so you know, the stream that they're getting is a little bit behind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's somebody on YouTube Live, I think maybe, that said hear the tone. Did you know that women hear... Okay, so according to the male brain, it's a book, men can hear about 6 tones of voice, and women hear more than, I think it's about 17 or 18 tones of voice. Like just the mechanisms of our brains just don't pick up tone in the same way. Did you know that when boys turn about 13, they stop being able to register certain frequencies of sound, which is about the same range as the female voice? They can't really register that frequency. They can hear a male voice, but it's hard for them. They have to really concentrate to listen to a higher pitched tone. It's just the way the brain is designed. You can train yourself out of that, but there's certain things, right? And so we're kind of, part of it is wiring, and then part of it is socialization. And we can always rewire our brains. So that's not an excuse like, oh, sorry, you only hear 6 tones of voice, so you didn't catch me there. Like, that's not an excuse, but at least understanding why maybe we have different ways of communicating. And I think you're right. I think there's an assumption that we know how to do it.
Yeah, and I think part of it is one of the misconceptions. So I was listening to something earlier today from took notes. Dr. Lisa Feldman, and she was talking about how the brain. I think we talk about communication, that we can take any communication as objective.
We can,
but really the brain is not objective; it's subjective.
It's totally subjective.
And in this, what that means is that we have certain patterns that we've developed over the years. So what you were talking about. Becoming friends with our sheriff rather than our captain, all of those things. We've created these neural pathways where we just react, right? So I'm listening to something, and the brain has already decided how it's going to react. It's not paying attention to the information. It's not paying attention to facts. And if you think about
this, actually in studies, people don't even hear the facts, don't even hear the information, because they're already assuming they know what's being said. And
if the facts agree with them, they'll use it. If the facts don't agree with them, they won't register. They won't register. Yeah. And when we're in these climates of communication where people are just not paying attention to each other, it's like, how can they just ignore these facts? Because it's not a factual thing for them.
Right.
It's a subjective feeling, right? So again, if that's true. Right. So how do you start communicating with that information now? Right. Like, you have to really understand that when I'm communicating, at least me, I'm communicating with you, which means listening, speaking, feeling, all of those things, interpreting. All of that is now based on a pattern that may have been created when I was 2.
Right.
Right, so
this is like every person you talk to.
So I think one of the things, when couples come, whether it's a couple or any other relationship, right? Like, when there is a problem in those relationships, people always say we're not communicating. But the thing is that it's not that you're not communicating. You are. It's that when I say red, you go that way and I go this way. Because that's just so
we're not understanding each other. It's not that we're not...
Like, the word red means totally different things to each other, to both of us, right? So we've shared this example in the past about you and me, how we used to think about money. Still, to this day, right? The word money means something totally different to you than it does to me. And trying to get on the same financial budget and page and all of those things took us years. And we still struggle with it at times, where we don't see eye to eye, because money, the word money, what it represents,
what it lights up in your brain is different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's important that we all understand about communication is that just because I'm saying red, I'm saying do the dishes, I'm saying right, whatever I'm saying, and the other person's just feels like they're not getting you, it's because they're not getting you. Well, they're not getting the pathways you're taking.
The example just before Monday Musings. So here's a little example, okay, from our own life. So I was in the car driving home, and after school, my daughter has to walk the dog. That's her chore, her task. She has to do it. It's her task. And every single day after school, she doesn't want to do it. Every day. I think there was 2 days in the last 2 years that she actually did it without being asked. So she doesn't like it, but she has to do it. And so today we went to Walmart after school because we had to pick up some groceries, and we had to pick up some clothes and whatever, gym strip, and I don't know, we had to pick up some stuff. So we come home, and now it's much later than she usually comes home, right? And so as we're pulling in the driveway, I say, while we're in Monday Musings, why don't you take our dog for a walk? And then afterwards we can all have dinner and whatever, rather than usually they just watch TV while we're doing this thing. And she's like, I can see her face. She's a social butterfly. And so I'm like, well, ask Baijan, ask your brother to come with you. And she's like, well, he's going to say no. And I'm like, well, if one of you's suffering, you might as well both suffer together. That's how I was raised. Like, everybody suffers together. And we kind of laughed and left it at that. So we come in the house and she asks him, Baijan, will you come for a walk with me? And he's like, why? That's your job. And then it kind of started, right? And he's like, I need to rest. And then Faizan somehow got wind of this conversation and just got a little bit elevated. I'll use that word. I could see it like rising, right? He's like, I don't know what it is with you kids and rest. Like, you're children. Do you need to rest? Like, what do I've been working all day too. And he started, right? And I was like, he was walking up the stairs and I was just like,
I left it before you.
But you were like, can you explain to him?
Yeah, I just said.
You did.
I left it to you. To say,
you're like,
deal with
I'm not going to be able to get through. So what I had to do in that moment is I had to make a call, right? Like, what is this communication going to be about? Is it going to be about me lecturing my kid, which is kind of how I was raised, and him kind of internally rolling his eyes and feeling like my mother doesn't get me at all? Or can I listen? And I had to really like do this like self-talk to shut up inside and actually listen to what he was saying. And what he was saying was, you're assuming that I don't have anything else to do, and you're assuming that blah 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 blah. So I'd never thought of it that way, because to me he's like a kid that doesn't have anything else to do. Like, what do you have to do, right? And he's like, well, I have to talk to this friend about this thing in school, and I have to do my Dungeons and Dragons. I'm like, oh my god. But for him, he has like in his mind, he's planned, okay, after school at 5:00 I'm going to do this. 6. He's a very methodical child, and me just throwing in a walk in there like disrupts his whole thing, and he gets all in a tizzy. So I had to make a choice about what is this communication going to be about, and it had to be about listening. It had to, because otherwise it would have been one more mark against us as parents who just don't understand. If it was that, and this is not, and he said, so he comes back down the street, he's like, so did you get through to him? And I said, today's not the day to get through to him about that, right? I needed to listen to him and I needed to understand him today. And then another day when the opportunity is right, we will have that conversation. But when he's like on the verge of tears and like really angry is not the time to make a point about, come on, you need to be resilient and push through. Right? So there's an example, because I think in our day-to-day lives, like we miss these cues all the time with each other, because it's like, I want to say what I want to say and you've got to hear it. And it's like, okay, maybe you say whatever you want, but what are you doing to the relationship in that moment when the captain is offline and the sheriff's speaking? My sheriff was speaking, his sheriff was speaking, Faizan's sheriff. It's like somebody had to get the captain on board. And what I had to do is just shut up. Like, just shut up. Just close your mouth and listen, which is hard for me. Right. But I did it. And
for me, the captain was walk away.
Right. That was how like the captain...
This is not going to resolve itself with you being this focal
point. It's like a little example, right? But hopefully you can relate that, like, these little day-to-day interactions where we can elevate, we can get so elevated and we can rile each other up, and it's not necessary, right? What is this other person, not what do I want to say, it's what are they saying? Like, if we flipped it and said, could I understand what's happening for this person here? Right. And I think for me, because I'm a therapist, I spend all day doing that. When I come home, I don't want to do that anymore. So I have to okay, what do I need to understand about this? But if it was a client, I would respond a different way, and that's why we don't therapize our children.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
Okay, here's a question that's coming through. Should we address it?
Yeah.
So question is, I find in certain situations, if I'm triggered, I feel it in my body. Depending on the situation, even if I'm self-aware, I can't soothe myself and release the tension as quickly. Is that the sheriff taking over? How do you interrupt the sheriff? How do you get the message to the sheriff? Any guesses?
That's an interesting
Anyone have a guess? How do we get to the sheriff? Because remember, the sheriff's job is just to keep you alive. So the sheriff's going to take over your whole nervous system and just keep you alive.
Maybe before you answer that question, one of the things, again, just talking about the brain, the physical brain. Mm-hmm. When these certain triggers happen, certain chemicals are released, right? So with the communication, technically we want to communicate so we can feel good, right? We want to get our point across. We want to feel heard. We want to make sure the other person feels heard, that we feel connected. Like that's what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And every time we're communicating, whether it's, I'm communicating with you, communicating with the kids, communicating with my parents, doesn't matter who, it's like there's certain, like the brain is like, okay, I'm just going to start releasing these chemicals because this is usually what happens
yeah.
and the pattern that happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so part of the sheriff piece is around the type of chemicals that are being released and the body kind of I guess responding to that,
mm-hmm.
right? So part of it is that I feel stressed, and so now how do I respond in that stressful manner? Like the stress hormones are being released before
the mind kicks in.
The phone call comes in, it's like, oh, it's my mom. Oh, okay.
Right? And already there's a
yeah. So
right.
So it based on, like, if you can address that while you're talking about the sheriff, because that's the piece, right? Like when we're trying to interrupt, the body's already gone 10 steps ahead, right? So now to address it is a little bit difficult.
Yeah. So, okay, let's think about what happens when those stress hormones are released, what physiological impact it has in the body, okay? So for some people, so for all of us, it will change our heart rate. Our heart rate will increase. Our lungs will start breathing more shallow. Our pupils will dilate. We'll get really focused on one thing. Not dilate. What is that? I don't know. They'll do this. It's the opposite of...
Okay.
Whatever. They'll be like affected. Our sight will be affected. Some people feel like they get tunnel vision, right? What else happens? The digestive system slows down. The reproductive system slows down because you don't need those things happening. Everything's just like paused. Like all the systems in our body, our immune system, like everything's just constrict. Yeah, everything internal. Somebody saying I get internal inflammation. Yeah, so you might get like a pit, something in your stomach, right? So these things are happening in our physical body. You might feel like sweat, like this, you're feeling like heat releasing in you. Some people, like, I know for me, sometimes I feel like I have diarrhea, like right now, oh my gosh, my stomach. So these things are happening, and these are the body's way of fighting the tiger and getting you ready to run or fight or do something.
Or play dead.
Well, eventually, play dead, right? Polyvagal. So we won't get into the science. But so first thing you're going to try to do is fight. The next thing you're going to do if you can't fight is run. And then the next thing you're going to do if you can't run is play dead. That's kind of our biology, right?
And in this instance, obviously, play dead is...
just freeze. You're
just disassociated. You're just disconnected. You're not even listening, honestly, to what's going on.
Well, that's more flight.
But no, flight is you're just running away. That's not
But you
listening.
can actually do flight internally too.
Yeah.
So freeze is like where you're just numb. Like you're no longer here.
Right, you're just disassociated, right?
Well, disassociating is like you go somewhere else in your mind.
Yeah.
But it's a choice. Like I can't be here. And you start thinking about something else. Freeze is like you're just like a deer in a headlight. Like. So somebody's shouting and you're not even like, I want to get out of here. You're just like, I can't even move. You're stuck and frozen. Right. That actually happens with a lot of with rape victims. That often happens where you're just like, and I couldn't even say anything. I couldn't move. It's because that your body just took over, and that was the way to keep you alive. Is just play dead, freeze, right? Okay, so I was going somewhere with this. Oh yeah, okay. So these are all the things that happen physiologically. Now we cannot control our heartbeat just with our thought. Like you can't tell yourself, heart, slow down. You can't tell yourself, sweat glands, stop sweating. You can't tell yourself, pupils, stop. You can't do that. But what you can do, there's one thing you can do. There's one physiological system that you can control, and that's your breathing. So the first thing, and I know it sounds super simple, but it's the first thing is deepen your breathing. Slow, full, deep breaths. Because when you start doing those full, deep breaths, you're sending a signal to your body that there's no tiger here. Because if there was a tiger, I wouldn't be breathing like this. The threat has passed. Yeah? We have one of our practitioners is studying something called somatic release. And so what they talk about is how, in the wild, if there's like like a lion and a gazelle, and then the gazelle runs, and then the lion, and then everything's over, and then the gazelle's nervous system calms down because they got to run, right? Most of us aren't doing enough physical exercise to burn up all the extra stress hormones that are just dumping into our bodies all the time. So one solution for ongoing lowering of our cortisol and managing our inner space is aerobic exercise, like running, actually running, or jumping, or something where your heart is racing and you're sweating. That actually helps from a long-term perspective. In the moment, it's breathing, deep belly breaths. So you said that I'm trying to self-regulate. So that's what I'm assuming you're doing, is doing that slow breathing, and it'll take maybe 5 or 10 breaths. That's okay. And if it's taking more than that, then you got to check your thinking, because that means you're probably adding thoughts. So when that flood happens, what if you were just to be with that and not try to and that's actually what Monique teaches in her energetic centering, right? Is how do you be with the emotion and don't repress it, don't run away from it, be with it, and rewire your brain so that you're not always going to that state automatically in certain conversations.
And I think when we talk about, and this is a concept of neuroplasticity, right? Where you can kind of rewire the brain. Mm-hmm. I think we've been wrongly taught that, once at least in certain instances, if the brain is set, it's set. But it's not, right? No. we can
unless
rewire
there's
those
a
patterns.
Head trauma.
Yeah. So exactly, there are physical trauma. There's other things that are going to happen, but in most instances, we can rewire the patterns that we've got, right? And part of that starts with breathing, because it brings that mindfulness to this moment to say, okay, what's going on? Because again, we said the brain, it's trying to do an automatic response because that's what it's good at. It's being able to take patterns that it's built up in the first few years of your lives and just repeating it, because it's like that's how
I stayed alive.
That's how I stayed alive, right? So if a conversation that seems to be like, okay, this is going to be a confrontation, I'm going to react this way. If it's going to be a pleasant conversation, I'll react this way. If it's somewhere in the middle, I'll react a certain way. But we can teach our brains to do something different, and part of that neuroplasticity is, again, just getting focused.
So this is another little technique now you have, right? So when you feel the elevation coming, you just, Captain, we need my where's the captain? Captain, back on board. So as soon as you bring language, like self-talk and language that's rational. See, the sheriff is not rational, not reasonable, totally physiological.
Yeah.
This part of your brain, the thinking part of your brain, is offline when the sheriff's in charge. So if you can bring that part of your brain back online, right, through even just tapping, just a simple thing. Now, might not be able to do that in the middle of an argument, right? So maybe then you remove yourself. In some traditions, people will give you a glass of water. If there's a lot of tension, the people will be like, here, have some water. And it's because it's going to make you stop. It's going to make you take a minute, take a sip. And then it's well, I couldn't be drinking water if there was a tiger here. So the system just calms down. So even just a sip of water, or sitting down. If you're standing up and having that conversation, sit down. It'll change your that reactiveness. Here's a couple of a couple more questions. You want to do that, or is there something else to add?
Yeah, so I think I wanted to add a couple of things here before we move on to the next comments and questions. Is part of it because of the neuroplasticity that we talked about, right? So yes, it starts with breathing, and a lot of us, when we're trying something new, and this isn't something new, right? This is going to be new. This is going to feel awkward. Sometimes in our couples course, we tell them how to talk and how to say things to each other. They're like,
this feels so weird.
This feels so weird.
So awkward.
Yeah, and it's going to feel awkward, but we have to allow for that awkwardness, and we have to allow for that discomfort, right? So if my normal reaction is to just blast my son, and walking away was discomfort. It was uncomfortable to wait, I didn't get my word in. Right? I didn't get the final say. I didn't put my foot down. No, walk away. Right? But part of that was it's being okay with the uncomfortable and saying somebody else can take charge.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that's different.
Right.
Right? And so for you, it was different to say, okay, shh, listen to my son. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and so it might be uncomfortable, and it might be uncomfortable to leave it also incomplete.
Unresolved, yeah.
Right? Because a lot of us like, well, we want
to get to the end of this. We want to figure this out. We want to hash it out. And one of the things that I say to my clients is don't have serious conversations after 8 p.m. Okay? Because after 8 p.m., the captain's tired, man. Captain's been working hard all day long. And so it's harder to keep the captain on board after 8 p.m. Yeah. It's just harder.
And I think, and so part of that is to, again, maybe do, if you have somebody who can support you, to provide you feedback, right? To say, okay, this is what I did. To kind of, again, it's going to take time. It's a new skill, right? Like the brain's been going 100 miles per hour down this way, and all of a sudden you're trying to have it change to go this way. It's going to take a little while, right? And it's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel, so it's like, hey, did I do that right? So it's going to be okay. But part of it is to get that feedback and then to reflect and refine.
And the other piece is around stories. So in Chai and Chat this Saturday, we talked about the stories that we tell regularly without even thinking about it. And what values are those stories communicating to the people who are listening, right? So if my story is, my dad left when I was 10, that's I say that easily and like just automatically. And now I'm starting to think, what if I shifted that story to, my stepdad really made a huge difference in my life, and I'm so grateful to have met him. Oh, so now it's not a story of like pain and loss and judgment. It's a story of like gratitude. It's the same situation happened, but how do I talk about that story? If we don't change our stories, we just keep running in these loops. So if my story is, I'm not smart, nobody cares about me, I can't do anything right. If that's your story, you're going to find 100,000 examples to tell yourself, see, look, see? Because the brain is wired to agree with you. If that's already your assumption, you will find things to say, look, I'm right. So the first thing is like actually challenging some of those basic stories and how do you know what your story is? Well, when people ask you, when you meet someone for the first time, what do you talk about? You talk about, maybe I talk about my profession, or maybe I talk about my family, or maybe I talk about, so listen to how you talk about those things.
Yeah, like what type of parents we are. Like, and to your point, sometimes you miss the actual story or other stories that are woven in.
Yeah.
Right? So the story of your stepfather, the story of a strong woman who had to step up and like may not have been perfect, but pushed through and got things done, and all of those things that get missed. Right? Like your mom. Right? Like like all of those stories get left untold.
Right.
Because we're focused on the pain.
Well, and for me, I think I was telling that story of my mom and her strength, but I had a story about men in my mind, right? Like not just my dad, but it was men. And so I'm like, wait a minute, there's another story about men here that I never tell. And I need to start telling that story and remembering that story.
But even then, right, like even when you were telling your mom's story, it was related to
him leaving,
right? Like it wasn't like just on her own. And I'm not saying that there's a perfect story to be told, but I think sometimes, it's like, oh, I feel alone. I don't feel I belong.
Right.
All of those things are I find reasons to prove those true. Mm-hmm. But all those people who made me belong, who made me feel I belonged with them, I had a home, all of those places I don't pay attention to.
Right. And that's a lot of the work of therapy is we start looking at what else is happening in your life besides the problem, right? Where are you actually winning? And let's build on that. Let's use those skills in this place where you're finding a problem. Okay, so here's a couple of comments, questions. Okay, can you scroll a little bit for me? Yeah. Okay. So, hi, I can connect with your example. So this is the example of with my son. I think that's when the message came in. But what is the solution? So we told you what our solution was, right? So for Faizan, the solution was walk away. For me, the solution was shut up, stop talking, stop thinking about myself, and actually listen to my kid. That was our solution in that moment. So it's like you're going to have to find your own solution in the moment. We can't say, okay, here's, do this. But if you could work on regulating yourself. So she says, with my boys every day, that's a struggle. And they have nothing to do but only gaming. Being a single mom, I'm struggling with them like raising, like my raising and bearing went in vain. Okay, I hear a story there, right? They were the best children 3 years ago prior to our trauma. Right. So, and that happens too, right? Where people will change because of a trauma that they've experienced. And so then are they getting help for that, right? Are they getting some professional support for that trauma? That might be something to maybe already do that.
This is advice. Admittedly, I'm giving myself as well, is spending time listening to our children, right? And seeing kind of where their head's at. And so
not when I was a kid, like that's what you were doing.
It wasn't about the kid thing. It was just like you guys, but like when I stepped up, when I went back up, I'm like, okay, wait, I know he's been working with his, like we've got a coach for him, right? So he's working with his coach, developing this schedule because of his overwhelm and all of those things, right? And so part of that schedule building was, okay, he's built in all of these time, right? And so I'm like,
that's true, yeah.
Right? So we're not honoring that, right? And so that's what he's hearing. And so again, it's like paying attention to everything that's going on without them talking and kind of listening in. Now, again, I don't know what the answer would be for your kids, right? Like it's different for every child. Yeah. But yes, they might need help. But I think part of the work that I know I need to do is work on me. Work on that communication style. Like, okay, gotta get out of here, right? Like, okay, I caught myself today. Right. Didn't catch myself yesterday. Right. Admittedly, failed yesterday. Caught myself today.
And to be fair, like I'll say, to your point, I don't think it's easy for a single mom to raise boys. I think that's really, really challenging. Just like I don't think it's easy for a single dad to raise girls. Like I think there's something about, we're using some gender stereotypes here and that's not true for everyone, but there is something about the world of men that's different than the world of women in at least today, in this day and age. And so I think what I've learned is it takes a man to initiate boys into the world of men. And so if you don't have that person living in the house, then are there other men that they look up to, that they connect with, coaches, teachers, uncles, cousins, like whoever, who can do some of that initiation? And you might not see that, you might not see the benefit of that, but it will probably benefit them in the long term. Okay, and that same person said, I'm really struggling with each and everything, not just the dog walk, no physical, financial support, emotional support. So that's part of it, right? Is building your own support system to make sure you have a group of people in your life who you can lean on and say, things are hard and I need to talk about it, right?
And again, if you're overwhelmed and there's every reason to be, right? So there's not a comment against that. It's like, it's going to be difficult to communicate. It's when you're tired, when not when things are ruminating in my own head for so long, it's going to be difficult to now also say, okay, how do I be the best parent?
Right.
Right. And so to cut yourself some slack, it's okay. Right. Like to have that self-compassion.
Like the fact that you're here trying to learn this, that says something about you wanting to help your family, right? So just even giving yourself credit, like, okay, on a Monday I took an hour and I tried to learn and I tried to figure this thing out. That's something that counts. Yeah.
And it wasn't perfect. It's okay, right?
But I'm willing to practice. I'm going to practice. Okay, so somebody else said, actually mine is coming across as not being understood and not being part of the conversation that's worth listening to. So usually I'm hard on myself and say it's like my fault and it's my age or that I'm not educated, etc., which is weird, but it happens over and over and over again. So those are the tapes, right? Those tapes that are playing from some other time in the past when maybe you were told that by somebody, maybe you were made to feel that way. And the thing is, one of my teachers says, we talk about Newtonian time, right? So Newtonian time is like there's a past, there's a present, and there's a future. And if we live in that mindset of Newtonian time, then my past, I just replicate it over and over and over and over into my future. I use the lessons of the past and that informs my future, so my future looks very similar to my past. That's the Newtonian perspective. The quantum perspective, so Einstein talked about quantum physics, and in what he said was that there's only now, right? Because the past is just a bunch of electrical signals in my brain that I call memory. The future is just a bunch of electrical signals in my brain that I call thoughts or thinking. But what's real is this moment. And if I'm bringing all of that baggage from back there into this moment, then I'm not actually seeing what's in this moment, right? So I might have a story about I'm not educated, or I don't understand, or I don't belong. And if I bring that to every conversation, my brain's going to say, see, look, even here. But if I could try to say, what's new about this moment? What's different about this moment? How can this moment be unlike any other moment I've had, right? It's a different way of seeing. It's like if you're painting, right? And if you only have two colors, like you have yellow and red, and you say, these are the only colors, and these are the only colors I'm going to use forever. You miss the whole blue because you just don't even think that it's a possibility to put blue on the canvas because your colors are red and yellow, right? So just kind of opening the mind to say, could there be another color here that I've never really experimented with or played with, but maybe I could try it. And let's see what kind of pictures I could get that way. Another idea, metaphor. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, so somebody says, I'm tired and overwhelmed with stress and too many things to do. Any suggestions to calm down? The to-do ones are hard, right? I was just talking to somebody about that this morning, about how in the culture that we live in here, there's almost like a pride in busyness, mm-hmm. right? Like people say, oh, Dr. Syra, you're so busy. And I say, I'm actually not. I just build in a lot of downtime. I say I'm unavailable because I'm relaxing on my couch reading a book. And I carve that out, and I don't try to fill it up with something. And I've learned that over the years that if I don't do that, I'm not as effective. If I have nothing to look forward to in my day that's just about me, I'm just not effective. Yeah. So thinking about, what could you do that might be enjoyable, right? If you're tired and overwhelmed with stress, too many things to do, could you take a 10-minute phone call and talk to a friend that makes you feel good? Not for some reason, but just to connect. Right? Could you sit down with a cup of tea and just say, okay, for the next 30 minutes, I'm turning off my phone and I'm just sitting here with this cup of tea and just looking out the window, or not looking at my phone because that's not restful, but reading a book or looking out the window or just thinking about life and drinking my tea. And I'm going to make carve this out for myself. Because if you don't do it, who's going to do it for you? Nobody's going to give you that time, mm-hmm. right? They're going to just expect you to push and do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. The other thing is, like Faizan said, some things maybe can be delegated, right? I find that people who are the most burnt out are also very, very controlling people. They want to do it their way and they want to... Me too, right? Like when I went through burnout, it was because everything had to be my way. And if it wasn't my way, it wasn't right. And so I just did everything, right? Rather than saying, some things don't have to be my way.
Yeah.
So maybe that helps. How can one help a friend to change how they narrate their story? Oh, I love how people are so wanting to share this, right? How can you help your friend? Well, ask yourself, how could a friend help you? If you're somebody who at some point in your life was stuck in a story, what could a friend have said to you that would have helped you get out of your story? I know for me, there's really not much anybody could have said. I think about when I was really, really heavy and struggling with my food addiction, and people would say to me things like, I'm really worried about your health, or are you sure you want dessert? Or and they were doing it from a place of love. Now I see that. At the time, it just felt like judgment, and it made me mad, and it made me want to eat more, actually. Right? And be like, F you. You think you know what's best for me, whatever. So I couldn't hear it from somebody else. That had to come from me internally. And one of the best ways to demonstrate is to do it in your own life. Because when you start feeling good and happy, people will get curious, what are you doing? Things have, you seem so happy, and what is your secret? And when they ask you, then you can say, I've learned this thing about how I tell my story. But if you offer that, if you volunteer that, you probably won't get through. That's been my experience. Somebody's saying, what if your daughter actually didn't walk the dog after complaining? Then what would you do?
Well, she would walk the dog.
Okay, so what I have done is I've gone with her.
Yeah.
I've just gone with her.
Yeah,
And be like, let's go together.
Gone with her as well, yeah.
Right? And because I know part of it is about the loneliness and the not wanting. It's not about being defiant. It's just I have a need. She has a need that's not being met, which is I want to be around people right now. Don't want to be by myself out there in the dark. Right? So if she really insisted, then I would just go with her, and I would be like, there's my third walk of the day, but I would just breathe. Somebody said, that same person saying, I tried to connect them with a counselor, but they say they're all good. They don't need a counselor. Now they're 17 and 18. I don't have any relations. They don't go out other with their friends, rarely. Yeah, so it sounds like you're in a pickle.
So with counseling especially, before we address some of the... I'm sure I'm not out of line to say, if the person doesn't want to be in counseling...
It's a waste of your money.
Yeah.
It's a waste of time and money for you and for the counselor and for that person. Because if they're not wanting the change, they can go and they can sit there. Like they
might not even realize they need a change, right? Like that's okay. It's perfect. That's where they are in their journey. But if they don't realize it, it's hard, right? Like it's difficult.
It takes effort
Yeah.
to go through the counseling process and look at yourself and look at where you're actually causing some of your own problems in the things that you're doing and how to shift that. Like that takes a lot of energy.
And at some point then we have to look at ourselves, right? Like, so when my son is struggling with scheduling and my calendar is like a crazy jumble of a mess, I'm like, well, I can't really teach him how to schedule things properly. So I need to learn. He needs to learn. He's figuring out how to learn on his own.
And he's scheduling and rested, which is something that I do.
And
right?
It's something I don't do, right? So, but like me having to learn as well, but like I have to focus on me at this point because my way of helping is no longer going to help, right? And so to be okay with some of that is that, okay, what is it that I need to do? Because at certain points, they're going to have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Whether they're 11 or...
And I have people in my life who have children in their 30s and 40s, and they're still asking these questions. How can I help? What can I do to fix it? And it's like at some point, their life has to be their life, right? And it's like sink or swim now. Like, try. I've given you the foundation the best I can, and now it's on you to kind of go and do that. And I think as parents, too, there's a point at which we have to step back and say, okay, they do have their sovereignty. They do have their spiritual sovereignty, right? They were entrusted to me. I did my part as best I could. And if they need me, they'll come to me. But maybe they don't need me right now. Maybe they need other adults. And that's a really hard pill to swallow. But it happens as our kids get into their late teens and their 20s, right? Okay, so somebody's saying, I did not try to resolve. I just tried to listen with no comeback. Yeah, that's what you can do. And making sure, again, that what are you communicating in that listening, right? Are you like, how are you sitting? What's your facial expression? What's your energy as you're listening to whatever the person's saying? Yeah. Someone's saying... I
think they were talking about kind of just sitting and breathing or noting, but they're saying they get bombarded with thoughts.
Yeah, so there's an exercise that you can try where you're just kind of watching your thoughts float by like clouds in the sky. You're not attaching to any one of them. So when the thoughts come, you think, oh, that's an interesting thought. Rather than letting one thought lead to the next thought, lead to the next thought. That's something that Monique teaches in her course. Yeah,
if you just pass, or if it's really bombarding you, get it out of your system.
Write it out.
Write it out in a journal. And it doesn't have to be like a 10-page essay.
Right.
Just writing out the thought that's coming. Oh, what's this thought? Okay. And what's it like? Letting it actually process through your body and then keep on breathing while that's just happening. But to see, because I think again, a lot of us have suppressed our feelings and our thoughts, thinking that if I stop saying I hate myself, if I stop saying nobody cares about me, right? If I just stop thinking it, it'll go away. But it doesn't, right? Like it actually never actually processes through.
And to be fair, we'd have to sit with you one-on-one and kind of hear your story and kind of give you customized tools. So this is not like therapy, you know, these are just some suggestions and tools. And I know there's people on this call, I can feel it, who are like, yeah, I tried that, didn't work. So yeah, if it's not working, keep doing it. It's like meditating. it's hard, and you just keep
and,
doing it.
And I think to do it alone is difficult. We've said it, and it doesn't mean you have to go into therapy. It doesn't mean like you have to find a group but somewhere that you can be part of a community, because part of it is we feel like we got into this mess alone, and now we're gonna try to use the same medicine to get out.
Right.
It's like it got us here, so maybe now let's see if we can get help, if we can get support of like-minded people. And I think that's a big piece is just finding sometimes that help to say, where can I go now?
And how do I use these tools, right? Like you learned a tool today. This is my captain. Now you can ask yourself, who's in charge right now? Is this the sheriff speaking? That's a tool. Just that question makes a pause, right? Yeah. It makes a pause in the usual way that things usually go. You say, I think this is the sheriff. And then you're like, okay, just take a minute. Captain, we're in charge. What might, so just doing that question in the moment, even if it looks exactly the same on the outside, you ask yourself the question, and that's how the changes begin. Someone's saying, thank you for sharing. I will keep trying. Someone else is saying, thanks, Ira, but what if she just doesn't want to go at all, with or without you, for no valid reason? If that were my kid, we would have a family meeting, actually, because that doesn't happen with our children.
Well, and there's
because from when they were really little, we've kind of paid attention when they really don't want to do something. What's going on here? What's really going on here?
And there's some boundaries, right? Like
there's some things you just have to do.
Yeah, there's some boundaries. So you're gonna have to push through. You might not like it, so that's why.
And there's probably and the reason could be I'm tired, and that's a valid reason.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. Or the reason could be I just don't want to right now, and that's a valid reason, right? You just don't feel like it. That's a valid reason. So then we talk about, there's sometimes we have to do things we just don't feel like doing. Right? And with her, especially because it was her dog, there's always that. We don't say it, but she knows it. You wanted this dog, right? So there's that other piece. But I don't think you can just suddenly do this with your kids. Like it's a building of a new kind of relationship, where it's not just authoritarian and you're the boss and you always get to do everything and they never get a voice. Like if you're going to do that, there's going to be pushback at a certain age where they're going to say, oh yeah, I'm not going to do it your way anymore. And they might not do that out loud. They might just do that internally or run away to university and do everything there, which is what I did. Just like do all my rebellion away, right? So hopefully that's, can you please repeat the question on sheriffing? So just the question, who's in charge? Where's my captain right now? Captain. What would my captain do right now?
And that's what we call a pattern interrupt. So a default things happening, like these thoughts are coming. And if you can remember to breathe, that's a pattern interrupt, because the pattern is going, whoa, what is this? Something's happening. And asking that question, who's in charge right now? Where's my captain? Just now what you've done is these thoughts that kind of run rampant on their own. Automatically, right? Like it's like the flood waters come, but all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's a little bit of a wall that you stand up. The water's still gonna come. It's not that it's gonna stop. The wall's not gonna be strong enough just yet.
Right.
But eventually you will build that as part of the pattern.
So lots more to talk about this month on communication. Thank you so much for bringing all your questions and your thoughts and your perspectives. Hopefully this captain tool was helpful for you. Someone saying thank you, great session. Thank you, Dr. Siren Faison. Thank you for being here with us week after week. And for those watching the replay, thank you for staying till the end. Put your comments and questions in the comments.
I don't know if I think we've mentioned it. All of these sessions are now at least
available on YouTube. Yeah, so since January, our first recording in January, you can find, so if you miss a week, you can just go into YouTube and watch it again.
Or you want to forward it to other people. Or you
want to pass it to people. Yeah, absolutely. So if there's like someone in your world who you think, oh, this is a really neat thing we'd like to pass along, pass it along. And then they'll and even pass on the videos, the newsletters, what our goal is to reach as many people as we can with this information as possible. So please help us in spreading it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thank you for your wonderful sessions. So glad to be back. Yes, welcome back.
We're going to start recording. All right. We appreciate everyone. Thanks to everyone on Facebook.